Thank you very much for tuning in to the Situation Room. This is Kenya's biggest conversation. We are now joined in the hot seat by Ndongo Wainaina. He is the Executive Director of the International Center for Policy and Conflict. Ndongo Wainaina is a man who's been vocal on many issues on government and policy and governance issues. He writes, he appears in media, he talks in fora. He's here today to talk on this radio station on how the government, the kind of measures the government is taking to ensure containment of the spread of coronavirus. Karibu sana Ndongo.
Thanks, and thanks for having me here.
Today is a day that does not have a lot of traffic. Give us your experience on the road coming here.
Well, I think first, my personal observation is life is slowly coming to a halt. When I come, I didn't use the main highway, so I decided to use the bypass, taking me through parts of Dagoretti, Kawangware. Then you are here, and when you see it's past 6:30, and all the matatus are just parked. Only very few people walking. That tells you that there's very little movement and mobility of people moving around. It also starts to tell you that slowly. There is very limited economic activities going on. When particularly matatus, by that time, matatus along most of those routes start operating as early as 3 a.m. in the morning, and when you see it's almost 7 and they are just parked there, tells you a lot. And actually, something else I also observed yesterday evening. Is a bit of movement of people outside town.
Yes.
So people are heading outside
Nairobi, and that to me worries me a bit because one of the things when you are dealing with this menace is one of the major things you need to do is limit movements.
Yeah.
And when you have such kind of massive movement of people, we start to ask the question, are we enforcing what you are saying? Because that's very, very important.
Are we on lockdown or are we not?
I think we need to begin by stating one thing, that we are dealing with a case of a health pandemic war. We are in a situation of a war-like, to be honest. And secondary is that we must also, I would want to say this, that I'm very happy that the government has used different legal tools it has provided to start to enforce it. But my biggest worry is this country has a problem on enforcement. And I think I haven't seen that serious enforcement of many orders and declarations that has been issued. And that worries me a bit.
What would you have like to see?
Like, for instance, I saw the Cabinet Secretary for Transport talking about the public transport means, and you know this is one of the largest movement of people. Kenyans depend on public transport. Yesterday I took a bit of time to walk in downtown and all this, and it was telling that we still have a very sizable group of matatu operators who are observing this. I saw the Cabinet Secretary talking about fumigation. I asked the matatu guys, how long are you doing it? They said, no, as long as we have the sanitizer on the...
That's enough.
That's enough. But also some of them don't even have. One other thing I observed is we are still so much crowded on these matatus. Yes. And one of the key things, and it's good Dr. Masika has just pointed out, is the whole question about social distancing is key in handling this.
So we're talking about social distances everywhere else, and then we get into a crowded matatu.
Matatu, yeah.
Negates the whole point.
Precisely, it defeats the whole thing. And let me say this, and I want to begin. I want to what do we know so far? Because that's for me is the beginning point. What first is that the entire essence, all the countries that have succeeded in containing this virus, they have been very, very proactive. They are 3-4 steps ahead of the virus. They are not chasing after it. So they are taking early interventions without compromise. And I want to give you an example. Look at countries like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. These are countries that are just next door to China.
China.
And as of this minute when we are seated here, a country like Taiwan had only 77 cases. Hong Kong has 157
And
cases.
the movement between China and this country
and Singapore,
on a daily basis.
Singapore has 266 cases. As we are speaking here, that's the latest data. What does that tell you? These countries, by experience they had with SARS and MERS earlier on, they are just like the countries that had on Ebola. They created early intervention. They decided they must be ahead of the virus. They are not chasing after it. So they also made sure that they were able to have very effective tracking system for any person who had an interaction with China or any other country that has been, this something they had developed. Secondly, they had a very effective quarantine mechanism. They were not joking about it. And then finally is that the whole question I've just talked about, social distancing. And one thing I think I want to tell Kenyans is this, and I am very happy that you are able to share this information, and you need to keep doing it. It's Kenyans should stop taking this thing like a joke. They should stop thinking that it is a government thing.
Yeah.
This is us. This is a life and death thing. It is about we as Kenyans. We cannot purport to think that it is about government. No. It is us as a Kenyan. We must become extremely responsible and disciplined. For me, that's key.
Sure, I hear you, Wine, on this. Looking at what people have said, I mean, you get opinion of what people have put out there and said, okay, that's great, but then I require money in my hand on a daily basis in order to keep going. How do we reconcile the two? I know this is a serious thing, but for a lot of people, what is more serious is eating that day. And is there no integrity in that belief that, I get it, and I know that people could die, but I could die also from not eating.
Yeah, you see, actually one of the biggest challenges we are faced with in this country is that right now, the worry is the level of poverty in Kenya has actually increased. If you look at the latest Afrobarometer report, just came out the other day, the level of poverty level in Kenya has actually tremendously increased. In fact, one of the things they are facing challenge on is access to basic medical care. And here we are. So I concur that we need to eat, we need to find a way of eating, but at the same time, we also need to understand we have epidemic we have to handle. So the question is, have we come up with a balancing act on that? And the reason why I'm saying that is that when I read across, and I like doing a lot of research, is that countries like the countries I've just talked about, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, they have not closed their businesses, they are not closed their lives are going on, but they have a very, very effective
system.
Public health care system. They have put very clear, stringent measures, but they do not want to shut down their day-to-day lives. Because one of the biggest problems we have in this is that we are having a health pandemic problem that is going to have a serious economic and social and financial implications. And when if already we were struggling before
now look
before
at this.
Now throw this into the ring and see.
And now here we have it now. What will be the escalation? Our economy was actually going down. Now here we are. When we don't do any small production in a day, let me tell you this. This country is largely, by and large, depend with imports.
Yes.
Our economy is just basically import. Everything from
toothpicks
to everything. Now, today, we do not have, there is a complete shutdown. You saw we still have.
But does that mean that we don't have the capacity to produce these things that we import?
That's big. That's the biggest question about the entire question about our policy, our country. What is our economic policy directions we
focus
take?
Really,
and really, it also raises fundamental questions about our political decisions, because economics and financial outcomes are actually determined by political decisions that we make. So the kind of political decisions we make has a serious implications in terms of the country you build, and the kind of, like, I can tell you this for free. You have seen the Ministry of the Treasury, the Central, they have kept quiet.
They'll talk to us tomorrow.
But I can tell you this. They have very limited tools they can use, they can deploy right now. Why? Because for the last 5 years or so, we have been spending close to 40% of our budget excess of what we have.
We've gone to 60.
Now you added to 60. So if you cannot use monetary tools to actually address this, because
you don't have money anyway.
What you do with that is, if you decide to lower rates and all that, then the consequence of that is that down the road you'll suffer from a massive inflation.
Yeah.
So how will you be able to address that? So then you're only left with one thing. Can we have a kind of a financial relief that can actually kind of support small business? Because this country is largely run by informal small businesses that can give relief to that. Then can we start to think how the government can mitigate for people who have loans?
Yep.
Because that can help
People
in terms
who are
of
servicing loans.
so that people are servicing loan. And we look at things that are really going towards supporting people directly to be able to move.
You know, the situation you described now was not very dissimilar to the time of the Moi government. We know what the lending institution in the world had done to the government, but this so-called hidden economy that we speak of, this economy that runs the country, it was actually first recognized and understood around that particular time.
Yeah.
But the Kibaki era took us beyond it.
Actually, what Kibaki era did is actually to open that informal economy and tried to make a very significant part of it to be integrated in the formal economy.
The Kibaki government
Yes.
did the one thing that you require in an economy. It put money in people's hands.
Yes.
So economic activity could be spurred on.
Yes.
This government has done the complete opposite.
Actually, what it has done is it has actually taken us way even beyond Moi. Because if you look at everything that we have,
we are at Governor Who now in the colonial era.
Because
McDonald.
Because you see, like if you look at you do a basic breakdown of all the key sectors of economy in this country. Agriculture is dead, as you're speaking. It has completely gone. And you know, it is everything for us. We are no longer manufacturing. We do not. Small businesses do not have credit. Private sector has a negative investment.
There's an entire stranglehold.
Yes. So if for a long time we have not been able to build that kind of a system, and then that kind of an economic strain we are in, and then you have a very poor, dysfunctional public health system. Now, I don't want to be very...
No, it's not being alarmist.
But I like being honest because I brief. Sometimes we like having been...
We sugarcoat things.
Which by the end of the day ends up destroying the whole of this country. I think we need to be honest. But one thing I'm very proud about is since we devolved health, for the first time, there are people in this country who saw a nurse. They could not differentiate between a nurse and a doctor. Yeah,
everybody was daktari.
Because even up to now, there are so many places.
Even the sausage seller and the bus park with the white lab coat was a doctor.
Yes, but you see now, there are places where for the first time they saw a facility called a dispensary. So devolution in some counties has really transformed lives of people.
It has.
Access to healthcare, and that's what my interest would be. And the point we have made, and we sent out a statement, and one of the things we said, if we want to succeed in this case, outside the key things, for the things I talked about, social distancing, quarantine, tracking, and isolating people, the other thing we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing with the frontline health people? We need to make sure that all our doctors, nurses, community health workers, because that's for me is one of the most primary community health workers. Are we able to give them the proper information, the proper instruction? Are we able to give them the support they need, the protective gear they need, and for making sure that they are able to work with people to deal with? The other thing is information. Information. We need to have well-trained people able to provide up-to-date information. In fact, almost like a minute by minute.
Yes.
People have information.
Ndongo Wainaina is the executive director of the International Center for Policy and Conflict. He's in the studio. We're looking at what the government is doing to address this what has been called the epidemic globally. This is coronavirus, and now we know we have cases in this country. What are we doing? What is the government doing? Are those measures enough? What more can the government do? On the hot seat this morning, this hour, is Ndongo Wainaina, the Executive Director of the International Center for Policy and Conflict. We are talking about government preparedness and reaction to this coronavirus. You're talking about health and healthcare, looking at our primary healthcare and ensuring that those people who work in that line are properly equipped, properly trained, and are given the right information to deal with this.
Yeah. And I want to give you an example. You saw in Bagadi Hospital yesterday. Is it yesterday when
when they went on strike?
They went on the go-slow.
On the go-slow, yes.
They raised, and one issue they raised is they don't have proper protocols. They are not being trained on them. They do not have information about the whole of this virus.
Yep.
They didn't have the protective kit they needed. They raised a number of things. And these are the real things that start to ask the question. Is what the government is saying, where is the practice?
Yes.
The disconnection between declarations, orders, and the practice
And
on
the
the
practice.
ground. If for instance, and Dr. Masika talked about the hotline,
Yep.
when I talked about well-trained people with proper information, proper instruction, I highly doubt, I haven't tried the numbers, but I highly doubt we have the kind of people who understand the whole this information about coronavirus. It is most likely if you have somebody on the other line, on the other side of the line, and you start asking those questions, then the first thing they ask you is, you can only refer you to this and this. And I want to give you a practical example. I called my mother on Sunday. The first thing she says in the rural place, the first thing she asked me is, I could hear in, she's very old now, is the panic. And because she's normally suffers from some form of allergy. Now you see that for her is like what you call pre-existing condition.
It is a pre-existing condition.
So for her, it is that you could feel that. Now imagine how many millions of people.
Yeah.
The first thing she asked me, what is this HOMA? What is this? I have my code. How will it affect? People need information. So there are three key questions we need to ask ourselves. How much information do Kenyans know about coronavirus? How do they differentiate coronavirus with the normal
common code?
Because one of the things you find is people will start have a sneeze or a normal
Then
cough.
they panic.
And they're worried.
They panic. The next thing is you find the hospitals being crowded.
Yes.
All right? Now,
So we need to be proactive on this.
I said we must be one step ahead of this. Let's not run after us. So the first question is, how much information is made available to the public to know and understand what coronavirus is? How do you differentiate coronavirus from the rest of normal thing?
Yeah.
The second thing is, people need to know what steps they need to take to protect themselves. Right? They need to have that information.
Yeah.
What actions do I need to take? Then the third is, there are those government enforcement things they require. For instance, when you talk about public transport, and we know that's largely what majority of people use,
Yep.
to what extent are those public means, have they met the requirements set by the government? Who is on the, I don't expect, I don't expect a government to issue an order and then all of a sudden goes back to the office. I need to see officers on the ground monitoring the situation.
With the way in which it has come out, if you use that as an example now, the third thing that you've said, if you want to now look at that and open it up a bit, say that, okay, what we saw is that it was punitive from the get-go, that if you don't have the sanitizers, or if you're not washing your vehicle, your license would be revoked for public transport. Is that the way to go about it?
I think the point here is this. First and foremost, you need to give people information to understand.
People need to understand.
People need to know and understand what it means by coronavirus and what is its implication. We are dealing with a disease that can take time to manifest itself openly. It is silent. It can, at this experience we had with China, with America now, with Italy, Spain, and they are telling a story that if you're not taking proactive measures, preventive measures,
This thing will overwhelm you.
So the question is, when we tell Matatu people, you must fumigate your vehicles.
Sanitize your vehicles.
Sanitize your vehicles. Make sure that they are after you do it.
After every trip.
Yes. Who is monitoring that enforcement? 2, are we able to engage these people, or you just woke up in one and issued a declaration?
But Wainaina, they'll tell you there's no capacity. They don't have enough people to be on the ground doing this kind of thing. There's not enough money. That's what you'll be told.
Actually,
how do you deal with that?
Remember this panic.
There are very many of these people who are at home.
But
would
why
now
do we
become
have
essential
police
service.
officers? I still see them just still on the roads and.
One of the things that HIV brought into the healthcare system were field workers.
Yes.
Or social workers. Now, these are lay people who were then informed adequately about the disease. But it's not just HIV, even public health. They've had what you call lay workers.
Yes.
There are counties in this country
Yes.
who have employed that particular mechanism for reaching out. And one of the things they have done, Eric, and you got it, they have called on personnel who we refer to as retired, who have the knowledge
Yes.
to lead some of these things. And you know why? They are in the rural areas. So it isn't that the capacity isn't there. It is the know-how or the willingness to actually utilize what's available.
Just the thinking. I'll give you an example. When it
Good
comes
word,
to communication,
thinking. Yes,
when it comes to communication, every ministry has a communications department.
it does.
Every state agency has a communications department.
Each one.
Now, many of them are at home because they are non-essential. They don't need to work from home, from the office.
And they're actually essential.
By the
during
way,
this period.
I want to tell
all
you
this
this.
information
Every
people
county,
can be
Now,
used to spread information.
before even you go to leave alone even
Every county has
every
information
county and
officers.
every department in a county has a communication officer.
Yes.
So the point is this: when I look at it, it's a point you have made is very, very important, because I made this point because I'm very active on social media. I said one of the best ways to handle this, and this I was looking at the experience with Ebola management, was the role of empowered community health workers and how they became the foot soldiers
Yes.
on the ground. They were well equipped, well knowledgeable,
Well-informed.
well informed, how to handle it. They went out there in villages. Like, for instance, how they have expected by now, we should be spending a bit of our resources in public education.
Yes.
Even if we are going to mount speakers on vehicles and spreading that information,
Yeah.
this is something that should be done. Now,
Use churches. Use all these
churches and all.
platforms.
But also this brings us to another one issue, what you call the entire national emergency response setup.
Yep.
Who are in it?
1, we don't have a policy. 2, we don't have a law.
Even
We've
if-
discussed this before.
No, leave alone even that. Who are in it?
There's nobody.
How?
No.
It's-
Now, 2 is this. If you look at the countries I have mentioned, and even now, outside even those countries, other countries, you'll find there's a very, very clear distinction between the professionals. There is a whole national pandemic response professionals who work is now to do the work Masika is doing here, coordinating the field, the people we are talking about in the field, those community health workers, training the doctors, nurses about the whole of this. They do it practically because these are the professionals. They have the know-how. Then you have the rest of the political bureaucrats and their normal staff on policy issues, directions, allocating resources and managing that. You see that clear distinction, basically. And one of the problem I have is I was looking at Donald Trump and how he made a fatal mistake of just like
He bungled monumentally.
Just talking. Yeah, without-
talking. Even contradicting professionals. Professionals could not speak because they don't know what. So what you need is a very clear and well-organized system. When you talk about Korea, Taiwan, they have what you call the National Pandemic Response Command, professional in their job. You have people who are in the political and policy on the other side, coordinating. I have not seen governors and the president meeting to discuss this. I have seen governors shooting each from their corner, right? And also that also takes me
But
back.
Wanaina, we in this country, this ineptitude that we have, if we just put it aside for a second and pause, we've had a huge advantage over many countries in the world because
Yes.
we already had an epidemic. It was called HIV.
Yes.
And because of it, there is a structure within which people have been responding to it.
Yes.
So it's not that we're not starting from zero. the mindset of how to deal with something of an emergency exists.
Yes.
A
Now-
health emergency.
Yes, it exists. And HIV hasn't gone away.
It is still here.
It's just that it's been managed to the point where it's been normalized. Now, when someone says they're not able to, it's very unfortunate, and we don't want to sound like we're kicking the government in the teeth, but it's just speaking the truth.
Yes.
Why must they wait for donor funding to arrive at us before they start moving around? And yet, as I said, there is information all this time before World Bank talked to us, information telling us what other countries were doing. We have it. There are professionals who understand these things. But the voices we kept hearing were the political voices, the bureaucrats, not the professionals who actually know what they're doing.
The good thing, though, is that now all the politicians are talking about the same one thing, right? So there's some positive.
No, of course, yeah, we are not disputing that. But the point we are making is this. To add on the point you have made, Muga, is this. We also have one advantage. We have had countries that had already experienced the
benefit of
that information.
Yes.
It is already available.
Yes.
You see the document I've just given
Yes.
you. This summarizes the guiding questions. There are 3 key questions. The first question they're asking, how is the virus transmitted? The transmission mechanism.
Yeah.
That's the first question. The second question they're asking is the severity of it and how to manage it. The third question is, what are the prevention and control measures? 3 key questions.
3,
and they're very clear. Use those as your parameters.
So
to
by
move
the time
forward.
you're giving the answer, you leave no room for anybody to ask more questions.
Precisely.
It's clear.
You've sorted them
You've
out.
sorted them out.
And then you have a very clear protocols and guidelines that each one, whether you are in a political side or you are in professional side, we all know what are the protocols, what are the
Yes.
guidelines, and everybody is very clear.
Good. Dongo Wanaina is in the studio. He is the executive director of the International Center for Policy and Conflict. We are looking at the government response to coronavirus. And what I'm hearing you say, Dongo, is information. Not enough.
It's not there. And also, the kind of information you are getting is very scattered. It's not information. You need to break information.
Not structured and
It is not
organized.
structured. You need to break this information to a very ordinary person. Like I gave an example of my mother.
Yeah.
So when we talked on the phone, I explained to her. She could ask me specific questions, but I think also she was speaking from her pre-existing condition. But now she was concerned. I asked myself when we were there, and she was very happy. She now understood and all that. Then the question she asked me is this: why is government not giving people this information? People there. And back this country is largely rural.
It still is.
Yep.
It's largely rural. So access to information remain the radio.
It's readily, that is absolutely correct. We discussed this thing actually very early in the morning, and we were talking about the need to utilize resources that already are available.
Yes.
Like we said, for instance, call centers. But the issue of transmitting information through the radio, we've been saying it for the last, 3 weeks, because this is something that can be said in the morning at 10 repeatedly. It's a service that any media house will be ready to give because it's a service to the nation. No one's going to kick a fuss and say, pay us. They'll just say, what do you require us to do? I'm informed people like Safaricom have already set up, within the call center, specific booths where they're dealing with this issue. The government has at its disposal legal tools that they can use to ensure that these things actually happen.
In fact, one of the biggest legal tools they have is the Constitution. The Constitution, if you read the state of emergency article, one of the things it has done, it identifies national disaster
Specifically.
as one of the issues that can actually lead
To-
for calling of the national emergency, of state of emergency in this country. I think the government cannot claim to be having hands tied on anything.
No.
It is as simple as that. Because if for instance, today the president was going to declare a state of emergency based on this one alone,
They can.
it is a matter of invoking it and then using the correct lay-down procedures.
Procedures,
And
and
that's
informing people about
why,
it.
And it is well communicated. Then, and this, let me tell you something I've been asking. Adapt to today, and I hope, I wish Dr. Masika was here. And I really wanted to, I have been asking this question. Does this country has testing kits?
Yes, we do.
How many?
That now,
Where are they?
now you've got into the real
This
debate.
is the real thing. This is the real issue. In
I have
terms
been
of
asking
information
that
being-
But I
question
know-
for the last 2 weeks, and nobody
The
answers.
details you will not be given, but testing is taking place in the country.
But if you want to look at this kind of information that's being shared vis-a-vis what's shared in other countries, I said yesterday, for example, the US is very clear about what they have and what they don't have.
Yes.
They talk about PPEs and they say we have 12,400 to the letter. By the time that particular interview was over, she said, we've gone through and we've used. I checked my statistics and she said, right now, that number has gone down to 12,228. By the time she finished giving an interview,
Yes.
the number had gone. And they're very open about saying, this is what we have. This is what we don't have, for the purposes of people to then be aware of what is available and what is not. Okay, going on to another point now, we saw that the CS for the Ministry of Health yesterday said, and if I quote his words, I remember very clearly, he said, this is not a joke, this is not a drill, this is the real McCoy. What needed to follow that statement in terms of action, Wainaina?
First, and I think you got it right. One of the things we need in this country is a government that is transparent. We need transparency in government. We need truth. We don't need this
I want to pause for a little
beating
while.
about the corners.
repeat
We need
it again.
a clear transparency.
Bwana Wanaina, you asked for a transparent government.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I'm just saying this because
No, I'm listening to you.
That's
and,
what we need.
Let's walk it around your mouth a little bit more.
I have used that
Yes.
word. We need a
Yes,
transparent
yes,
government.
yes,
In a
yes.
situation like this, by the way, even if you issue million and million declarations and orders, and you yourself, like, let me ask you a question. The reason why I kept asking about testing kits and where they are and how many we have is the next question I'm going to ask is, do we have a contact tracking mechanism?
You know, you're asking difficult questions.
I also
alright.
think, let me just come in here. I think, and that's what I was talking about, the systems of government. The system of government of ours, where we major on the minors. We, as the population, we need to be thinking about the basics. Let's make sure that we do not expose ourselves to this virus. Now,
Number one.
whether the government has the testing kits, how many do we have tracking mechanism, that is secondary.
No, it is not.
No,
do you
no,
know why?
no.
Just hold on. Do you know why it is not secondary? Already we have 4 cases in this country.
Yes.
No,
Right?
already we have been informed
that there are
that
four
we have 4
confirmed
cases.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm
Carry on.
operating from that point.
See again the Kenyan people.
No, the reason why that's so important is this. We do not have the know-how or knowledge how many people came into contact with these people.
Yes, we don't.
Now-
No, we don't.
Now, just hold on.
Yes.
In the case of Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, they have even a texting system that the moment a case is reported, they have a record of whether that person was involved in any form of movement,
Yes.
from where to where.
And
They
what
have a
time
data
and whom.
record on that. That data record is fed directly to the immigration and custom so that they're able to see who are the people who came with this person.
Yes.
You saw there's the struggle that was in Parliament yesterday when the issue came up that part of the MPs and parliamentarians
travelled on that same date.
on the same
Flight.
Now look at that the stampede that came about that. That tells you we do not have a clear protocol on how to go about contact tracking of these people.
Yes.
And now, if we are having a virus that is silently spreading, by the time because we don't have that tool, then by the time the thing comes, how many other people
No,
would have?
so
So it's a simple.
still with
So those are the facts.
so that's
We
what-
don't have the tools, all right?
Precisely, but-
And as we are speaking right now, that virus is spreading in the country. Facts.
Yes.
So what should we be concerning ourselves with as the citizens? Is it the fact that, the government does not have this
No,
tool? The
no,
government
we
is
are-
not telling-
no,
the-
no, no,
That
no,
is the
no.
government's job. Let's separate ourselves from the government.
Now, what our main job as Kenyans, and I have used the word social distancing.
Yeah.
A good example is we now can confirm there is very limited movement of people. If the traffic update you have just given
Yeah.
shows there is that limited movement. So
Yeah.
Kenyans themselves are starting to take it a bit, I am assuming, they themselves, if there is no that movement. The second thing we should be able to ask ourselves is, are Kenyans taking it seriously by just making sure they have access to a soap and water? Now, the question I asked yesterday, which I said, people could be accessing Kasmoro Kipade soap, but most likely to get to water in Nairobi is a problem,
Yep.
right? So have we been able to set up as Sonko
Water points around the
somewhere
cities.
people can in different locations where people can just access that water alone? Because that's, for me, those are the very big. I am not interested with these sanitizers and all that. I'm more interested with things that an ordinary Kenyan can be able to do.
get.
Yes. One other thing we need to ask ourselves, and this is something that if you look at the kind of life, particularly you live in formal settlement, we live in a very, very congested habitat.
Yep.
We must admit that, right?
Yep.
Do we have a way of making sure that in that setup, and this is where now the community health workers comes in handy, because they can be able to, become part of that system to support it, so that we are able to Kenyans are able to do basic things, but they will not be able to do basic things if they are not being provided with the prerequisite information they need.
Do you know there's something that Eric was getting at?
Hold on, CT. Let's hear from John, who's calling in from Nyandarua. John, good morning.
Yes, morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, John.
Yeah, very fine. I'm in Nyandarua. Nyandarua is fine. Now, I want to talk about this corona thing in Nyandarua.
Yes.
Being told to wash our hands.
Yes.
And the water that most people in Nyandarua use are stagnant water. It's stagnant water from the dams. So I don't know whether this would escalate the problem or would help the problem.
John, are people washing their hands in the dam,
In
or
the
are
dam?
they fetching water from the dam?
No, they have to fetch water from the dam
Okay.
to come and wash their hands because there's no running water. Now, if you go to the hotels, some of the hotels, hotel guys pick mandazis for you with their hands. They
Yep.
don't have that to handle. That's a problem that the health department in Nyandarua should look at very seriously. Then, when you travel in a matatu, these we call box vehicles, the government has not been doing its job diligently regarding those vehicles because there are only two windows in those box Nissan matatus, about two windows.
You're talking about ventilation now.
So it becomes very stuffy when you're inside those. Would this not escalate the problem? And this is an attention that people concerned should take note.
Thank you very much, John.
In order to arrest this situation.
You raised some very strong points. And it talks about the information and lack of information that's there
And in
with the people.
Nyandarua, and it's actually, it could be replicated in very many parts of the
Countrywide.
country.
This is countrywide.
Yeah, the water sources are exactly the same as
Same
his.
In fact, that's almost like the standard source of water in that's my county. I come from there,
Yes.
so I know it inside and outside. And it's a very small part of that county has.
But
piped
is
water.
there a problem with water in a dam? if
No,
you're going to
I think
fetch
what
it
the
and
most
then wash?
important thing is you can fetch water.
Because Nairobi water comes from a dam.
Definitely, but from Sasumwa Dam actually. But you see, it goes through process of purification and all that. But the point here, I think he's trying to make is, and this is all about information, is any water I can access as long as I'm using soap water,
Yeah.
or must the water be running water?
Yeah.
You know, those, for me, those, because
And does running mean coming from a tap?
No,
from
no.
a
I
tap.
think we saw that the World Health Organization regulations, so that running meant that it is flowing from whatever.
Yes.
You know,
It
if you're
can
going
be
to
from
from
a
a
cup
container, it
or-
has to be flowing
Yes.
because essentially you're trying to get the dirt to move.
Yes, yes.
So that's the thing that.
Yeah.
So you're advised then not to wash your hands in a bowl.
Yes,
But that the water should run through and then go out. And I think these are the things that we are looking at in terms of
It's
information that
information.
must be shared.
Yes.
Because something as basic, you would think, oh my goodness, why would you need to ask about that? But it is vital in a case like this where somebody's asking, all right, can I wash it in a bowl as I would normally do and then toss it out? No, it needs to be poured then onto your hands as you're washing, mimicking the motion of it coming from a tap.
Yes.
Right? So these are some of the basic things that I think absolutely need to be shared.
Yep.
And then across the country, because unfortunately a lot of things focus in Kenya on Nairobi. What about outside of Nairobi? Is this information being shared, and how is it reaching? Because we really can't joke around.
Well, let's
with
come out
these
of
things
this
that we
short
are
break,
seeing.
and then we can attempt to respond to that question about the matatus,
The matatus, yeah.
and the ventilation in matatus. I think we asked that question to Dr. Moses Masika, the virologist, and he responded about air and circulation of air. So as you continue the conversation, before we respond to that question about congested matatus and circulation and ventilation, let's pick this call. This is Zachary calling in from Nakuru. Good morning, Zachary.
Morning, guys.
Good
Good morning to you.
Oh, may God bless you because you are doing wonderful work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zachary.
Amen.
Yeah, and Mwarim should call upon his former students to actually propagate what you are talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, now, very briefly, I want to state about religion and this disease. You know, here in Kenya or in general in Africa, we tend to be even more Christian than Christ himself. Yesterday, as I was going out and about, I came across a group of people, and some women gave me their legs to, we greet, yeah. But one guy stubbornly said, "You have to greet me with your hands."
Yep.
I asked him why. He told me, "I believe in Jesus and I believe in religion, and this disease is not killing me, and I'm going to live to be more than 100."
Right.
And he was serious. So religion, we have to actually know how to approach this idea of telling people or convincing some people that we all of us are
Using the religious leaders to speak to their congregation.
Definitely. Now, the other thing the caller from Nyandarua has said is very true. You see these boxes, these big boxes, the matatu, we call them boxer. Those matatus, I don't know whether they were made for transporting perishable goods. They are very poorly ventilated. And it is true they have two windows.
Yeah.
Like me in particular, I like air conditions, you see. Anytime I bought those whatevers, I make sure that I tell them, please open, give us air. And the people who are sitting now next to the window, is like they become angry. So the government should think about it, yeah? Then the final point I wanted to make is this, yeah? The rest of the world is very, very much concerned, and we are fighting this menace together. But then I have not heard anyone mention about areas that seem unruly, like Syria, like Arabia, like even Somalia,
Yeah.
So don't you think that the world could actually be working hard to eliminate this menace? But then we are forgetting those three places where there is no
with weak governments.
order. Yeah.
True. Good point, Zachary. Thank you very much. Let's start with the ventilation issue.
Well, I mean, if you want to look at that, people getting into vehicles, the first, this is something across the board, the first action or non-action in this case is actually not to open windows. People are sitting and you're getting where you're going. And again, in messaging, this is something that needs to be shared, apart from, I do agree that vehicles need to be sanitized. This is what we see. That nobody's taking that into consideration. Nobody's actually doing it. Nobody's thinking about, all right, how is it going to help? Because people don't see the import is not being carried through.
I think the point we need to make here is very basic, and I think Dr. Masika made this point. This disease is transmitted through droplets.
Yes.
It's not airborne. So if and it can stay in a surface for more than 24 hours in a surface, any surface, right? Or when you are speaking like the way you are speaking, that's why you are even being told keep some
To observe the
distance. Is because as you are speaking, you can be spitting,
The droplets.
So when the concern they are raising here is simply this: if you are all of you congested in a matatu where you all next to each other, in fact, it raises even more bigger question. In a matatu, you sit 2 people or 3 people or 4 people.
Yep.
Right? The distance between all of us
Sitting in the next.
is actually it's not even half a meter.
Yep.
Actually, you're almost like 20 centimeters to each other. So we start to ask ourselves, and maybe people accidentally might not observe those basic hygiene of like covering your nose,
sneezing
and all that. So the bigger question here needed to ask ourselves is, this whole question about social distancing and things like ventilation, the movement, of these drops and how you can get them.
Yeah.
We need to have a proper information that is very easily explained. And every Kenyan need to know this. This virus is not in the air. It comes in form of droplets,
Yep.
either on a surface you have. That's why, for instance, you are being told, keep washing your hands for touching a surface, or keep a distance from a person, because that person, when he or she is speaking, could be having some droplets as they speak. They can have that. So we need to give people those basic information, how this disease is transmitted, so that it also removes anxiety and panic.
There's a lot of lack of information, evidently, from what you're saying.
You know, when Eric, while I was pointing to what you had mentioned, I want to elaborate on it. When you have, again, I'm pegging it to HIV, a virus, an epidemic, one of the things that became apparent when the disease was being tackled was this, or the virus that causes that disease was being tackled. It was what called a multi-pronged approach. So, when our friend Zachary talks about misinformation within the religious sector, religious leaders were brought into that discussion. So the pulpit was not just used for preaching the word of Christ, but it was a platform for social issues as well. They were forums for pastors alone to discuss these things, because even among pastors, there were people who were HIV positive.
Yeah.
They had spouses who were HIV positive. So it was not just their congregation. Every sector of the community was brought into the discussion.
Yes.
That is why the progress you see was made. When you talked about field workers, there were people who were drawn from that community, not from outside. So it reduced the element of stigma. The moment you have a disease, one of the greatest hindrances to ensuring you propagate the care and the treatment that is required is stigma. So people are afraid. They don't know what to do. And if you throw that with information or the lack of it, then you have a real problem. When information is clear, this is what you do. This is what you need to look out for. This is where you need to call. And those people are informed to talk to you about it before directing you. The levels of panic go down.
The point I was actually making, and it's completely what you're saying, is we need to be very clear to separate what government's role is
and ours.
what our role is.
I think there are basic
And then
things
we are empowered and we focus on our role.
Yeah,
Because everybody does their job.
I think it's necessary. I mean, because at this point, when you say what government should do, unfortunately, they are in the minority. The majority of the people don't
us.
have any say when it comes to the role of government. Or you can't come and say government should do, and then you'll be the one to go and sit there and make sure and enforce that they do. So the majority of people, there are certain things we can do. There are certain things that have been prescribed that we should do. And I think that's what needs to be focused on. Social distancing, washing your hands, don't touch your face, and then make sure that you are in isolation. If you exhibit any symptoms, if it becomes difficult for you to breathe, call the number and somebody will then come for you. It is clear.
Yes.
It is clear on that. That is what you have control
Keep
over.
repeating that
In this
over and
case,
over and over.
the thing that you have control over is the thing then that you should practice. Apart from that, you don't have control. There's nothing else that you can do. Are we really going to, Wanaina, in this case, go and then start policing in terms of what Matatu should or should not have? Could we then say government messaging then needs to change and this is what you should or should not do? Go and seek audience with an individual and say you're not spreading this information? No. But there are certain things that you can do to protect yourself at this time and make sure that as the majority
Play your role.
we can play our part
I
and
think
play our role.
the point here is this: Kenyans must become self-disciplined and take responsibility.
Yes.
This is very important, because we can be talking about social distancing and all that, but if we don't exercise personal discipline
Yes.
and personal responsibility,
It is not about Serikali's idea.
no, this is about us. And then the second thing is this: we need to tell Kenyans this. The most critical thing at this point in time, now that we have been informed there are 4 cases, now to use that language, we need to know this. Our most critical thing right now is to make sure we prevent any form of spread,
Yes.
whether in any locality or anywhere. That's very, very, very important. In situations where now it has been identified, the question now becomes questions of containment and mitigation, because already we know those they are
Areas.
they are already patients. They have come into contact with some people. We need to know what measures are being taken on matters of containment and mitigation.
Oh, that I
Dongo
agree is
Wainaina,
absolutely
thank you very much for
important.
joining us,
Yeah.
and thank you for coming this morning.
Thanks.
We'll
Thanks
call
a
you
lot.
again to come and review
Yeah.
the measures that the government has taken. Of course, they're listening to this. They're getting a lot of feedback. We'll call you so we can come and discuss and review, and also remind everybody in the country what our role is on this.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me here.
Thank you
Asante
very
sana.
much.